Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Matt. My name is Ty. I'm the youth pastor here at Mountainside, and it's great to be with you. And man, it was so awesome to watch Leanne's video, especially because I resonated with it in so many ways, particularly the first part and the second part. But the first part is that life is tiring. If you don't agree with anything else that I say this morning, you can agree that life is just plain tiring. And it seems kind of unfair that, the older you get, the more complex and challenging life gets with jobs and bills and kids, and definitely kids. I mean, I only have one. I can't imagine what Leanne was going through. But kids are so tiring. But you get older, life gets more complex, while your energy levels get less and less. I mean, I'm only 25. I can't imagine what artifacts like Matt or Sean feel like. Like, can they even get out of bed in the morning? That's probably why they're drinking coffee like 24/7. And maybe I'm coming at this a bit more of a glass half empty thing because Emery, for the last couple of months, has just been sleeping amazingly. She goes to bed at 8, sleeps until 8. It's just incredible, but I know that with each day that goes by, I'm only one day closer to welcoming another incredible, beautiful, amazing little sleep-ruining bundle of joy into my life. And I have to go through the whole process of sleep training and waking up every hour or 2 or 3. And I just wince when I think back about that. But so that's kind of on my mind. It's a little boy, by the way, which we are super thrilled about. It's going to join the posse of all the other kids running around Mountainside. But regardless of if you have kids or not, whether you got a newborn or not, tiredness is just a fact of life. To be alive, to be human, is to get tired. Because we're not robots or machines, we can make it 16 or so hours before we crash and need another 6 to 8 hours of sleep to recharge every single day. But there's a difference between being tired and being exhausted. Tiredness comes from activity and just simply being alive, but exhaustion comes from days and weeks and years of trying to keep up with an unsustainable pace. Like Leanne talked about, it is that bone-deep tiredness that doesn't go away no matter how much you sleep or how much you relax. It's this feeling of being perpetually overwhelmed by the continual need for more accomplishment, to achieve more, to perform more, to produce more, to have more, to care more, regardless of if you're a CEO of a company or a stay-at-home parent or even a ski bum. I mean, I'm sure Peter is just so tired from the need for more powder. But for so many of us, to live in the modern 24/7 digital world of more, our lives are characterized by this constant low-grade weariness of the soul that we just can't seem to shake. In a weird way, it's like some of those demands and exhaustion have been curbed by the obligatory change in pace that we've all experienced during COVID the past year. There's a whole range of things that we could once do before that we aren't even an option now. But even along with that has come a different form of exhaustion. Don't even get me started on Zoom fatigue. If I never have to spend another minute on Zoom again, I will be a happy man. But whether we're exhausted from the past, the way things were before COVID, or if we're exhausted from the way things are now, or a combination of both, so many of us, if not all of us, are exhausted in some way, shape, or form. But with Jesus, in our exhaustion lies an opportunity. It lies an invitation that is specifically offered to us, not in spite of our exhaustion, but one that our exhaustion actually uniquely qualifies us for. And it's the invitation that Jesus extends to all of us that we've heard before in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. That says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, because I am lowly and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." We're nearing the end of the Renovate series that we've been in, and those verses that I just read have acted as a summary of the whole series. As Sean said, the Renovate series is all about taking Jesus up on his invitation of rest by actually putting into practice the things that Jesus did so that our lives can be renovated from the inside out, so that our lives become to look more like his life, so that what he did becomes what we do, that his rhythms become our rhythm, that his practices become our practices, with the hope that eventually his life of rest, his life of love, his life of peace and of joy, this life that is close with God but also makes this history-altering impact on the world, can also become the defining characteristics of our life. And today, if you haven't noticed by now, we are looking at the practice of Sabbath, and how Sabbath is this tailor-made rhythm of grace for making Jesus' promise of deep soul rest a lived reality in our day-to-day lives. And as you're aware of, the thing about Sabbath is that it's a concept that comes with all kinds of baggage. So either from your own experience growing up on Sundays, where it was a day to honor God by having no fun whatsoever and being in church for 8 hours straight, or if it's just some outdated religious-y word that sounds like something your grandma enjoys but doesn't have any relevance in your actual life, or if it's just that thing that inconveniences you from finishing that project that you're working on Sunday afternoon. You got that leaky pipe and you just got to go to Home Hardware just to get one piece, but they're closed and you've got water everywhere. Okay, maybe I'm just working out my own things here, but maybe Sabbath isn't those things, and maybe it's just something you haven't really thought about before. Regardless of where you are and coming on your view of Sabbath, your experience of Sabbath, I promise you that Jesus' vision for it is better. In one of his classic one-liners, Jesus summarizes his whole view of the Sabbath as this: the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And in a bit, we're going to unpack more why that is so significant, but just hear this here and now. Jesus said that Sabbath is for you. It is a gift. It's not against us. It's not a burden or an inconvenience. It is actually for us and for our benefit. It is in our corner. It's not a commandment to be bound to, but a promise that we are invited into to enjoy. And so I hope today to show you that the rhythm of Sabbath was always intended to be this way, and still remains for us today an opportunity to grab hold of the promise that Jesus extends to us, the promise of rest in Matthew chapter 11 and everywhere else, so that we can actually feel rested today, here and now. And it's in these 5 ways. Sabbath is for you, first, to remember who God is and who we are. Sabbath is for you to cease from work and the demands of day-to-day life. Sabbath is for you to rest, not just relax, but to do the things that actually restore your soul. Sabbath is for you to delight in the good gifts that God has given you. And finally, Sabbath is to worship our God, who is the source of our rest. And Sabbath, it's something that has a long history. Its history is only 6 days younger than the rest of the universe. It goes all the way back to the beginning of time itself, which is recorded in Genesis chapter 2, when God rested after he completed his creation of the world. And if that's not significant enough, it's reiterated again in probably one of the most famous passages in all of Scripture, the 10 Commandments. And if that alone should signify to us that Sabbath and the rest that it's all about is kind of a big deal. But if it doesn't seem like a big deal to you, it's because you've lived probably your whole life in a world where 5 and 2 is our weekly schedule. We don't know any other way but to have time that is allotted for us, even by our government, so that we can rest. But for the Israelites, for the people who this was originally written for, who were hearing the command of the Sabbath for the first time, it would have been like an oasis in the desert. It would have been like a breath of fresh air. Because the commandment of Sabbath was given to the Israelite people shortly after God delivered them out of 430 years of captivity under Pharaoh in Egypt through the story of the Exodus. So for the first time in 430 years of 7 days a week, back-breaking slave labor, they finally heard for the first time, you can take a day off. And in fact, don't just take one day off. Take one day off every 7 days. For the first time that they had ever experienced in 10 generations, they had the freedom to rest. It was a free pass to relax and enjoy the world as it is, rather than striving to advance somebody else's empire. For all you kids who are on spring break right now, and how amazing that feels. You know, everybody loves spring break, except maybe parents, but everybody loves spring break. Just picture that you went to school every day for your entire life, and this is the first spring break that you ever got. That is how good that the Israelites would have felt in hearing this. They would have been absolutely blown away when they heard Moses say in Exodus 20, verses 8 to 11, "Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. You are to labor for 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You must not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female servant, your livestock, or the resident alien who is within your city gates. For the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the seas and everything in them in 6 days. Then he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy." And for them, they would have been like, this is a law? The law is to not work? The only law that we have ever known is that you must work always. Instantly, they would have seen that God that they are now following is so vastly different than Pharaoh. This God, the God of the Israelites, Yahweh, is it not a tyrant oppressor who cares more about his power and prestige than he does his own people? No, Yahweh does not need to strive to maintain his dominance over other gods or other rulers. No, this God, the God of Israel, is sovereign over all things. He was able to speak the universe into existence, and so he is more than capable of sustaining it without our help. The Sabbath shows us who God is, that he is in charge, so we do not have to be. And more than that, God is also for us. They would have heard that in Exodus, and then they would have heard Moses say the same commandment in Deuteronomy, but with a slightly different twist. He would say this: take the Sabbath and remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to keep the Sabbath. If Exodus told them who God was, Deuteronomy tells them who they are and where they came from, and that's why they take Sabbath. Saying that you used to be a slave in Egypt, but God freed you from that because that is not who people are. People are primary. If you are not a slave, you are not a cog in the machine or a mean to somebody else's end. You are a human being, an image bearer of God. You are not a human doing. And so you reflect both God's creative work, but also God's rest. But at the same time, as people, you are not God. You are not infinite, but finite. So unlike God, who chose to rest in order to enjoy his creation, you need to rest in order to both survive as well as to thrive. And so hearing these things for the first time, they would have understood, as a guy named Justin Hoffman said, just as Eve was created so that man wouldn't have to live alone, Sabbath was created so that man wouldn't have to live exhausted. So this is why Sabbath became this cherished practice for the Hebrew people that they knew was clearly for them. And so they would eagerly prepare for Sabbath as if it was the highlight of their week, because it was. They would prepare food and complete the chores well ahead of time so that they could spend a full 24 hours ceasing from work, resting in God's sovereignty, delighting in the gifts of family and food and laughter and pleasure, and worshiping God together as a community in a way that they were never able to before. But unfortunately, like so many good things, the Sabbath deteriorated over time, to the point where in Jesus' day, it was just a shell of what it once was. You see, Sabbath was once intended to free them from slavery, but it ended up becoming the very thing that enslaved them. But now instead of Pharaoh, the ruler was the law and the religious leaders who lorded it over them. And so these religious leaders, they heaped on rule after rule in order to ensure that the letter of the law of the Sabbath was keeping. was kept. So they added fine print that defined 39 different categories of things that you could do and things you could not do on the Sabbath. And it got so bad that it basically got to the point that to be alive and breathing was to break the Sabbath. And this was an attempt to gain God's approval by the outward appearance of religious obedience. And in doing so, Sabbath had become a burden for the people to carry rather than a celebration to be enjoyed. But fortunately, here comes Jesus. Jesus enters into the scene, and he is the burden lifter, the rest giver, and the good news bringer. His one line about the Sabbath being for man and not man for the Sabbath single-handedly exposed the religious leaders' corruption and how they had ruined the command of the Sabbath, as well as resurrected the original intent of the command. And this would have been, once again, a breath of fresh air, an oasis in the desert to the people who were supposed to be observing the Sabbath, but instead had the Sabbath observing them and finding them wanting. They were going through all the efforts of the Sabbath, but without any of its intended reward, and it left them exhausted. Now, the thing is, for us today, we're not in any danger whatsoever of being enslaved to the Sabbath because, by and large, we have done away with the practice of it altogether. Sometimes we can back this up by saying that we rest in the finished work of Jesus. Jesus is our Sabbath rest, so we don't need to take Sabbath. And as true as that may be, by discarding the actual 24-hour weekly rhythm of Sabbath, we manage to end up in the same place as the Israelites were in Egypt before the command was ever given. Enslaved and exhausted, except this time we're enslaved to whatever we want to do, which is often a far more vigorous taskmaster than Pharaoh. And this is why Jesus' words was for them just as much as it is for us. The Sabbath is for you. As a writer and thinker, A.J. Swoboda writes this in his book, Subversive Sabbath. He writes this: the Sabbath has largely been forgotten by the church, which has uncritically mimicked the rhythms of the industrial and success-obsessed West. The result? Our road-weary, exhausted churches have largely failed to integrate Sabbath into their lives as vital elements of Christian discipleship. It is not as though we do not love God. We love him deeply. We just do not know how to sit with God anymore. And he continues later when he says this: we have become perhaps the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, spiritually malnourished people in history. If any part of you resonated with that last line, then Sabbath is for you. If you're someone who says, man, I can't take a day off just because of blank, Sabbath is for you. If you're someone who says, don't worry, this is just a busy season, it'll pass, I just got to work hard now and I'll rest later, Sabbath is for you. If you're someone who says, or if you're someone who is constantly bombarded by the comparison trap of social media, that I'm not as blank as this person, if my kids aren't as blank as this person's kids, if my house is not as blank as this person's house, then Sabbath is for you. If you say that once I get this, I will be happy, or once I'm able to do this again because COVID restrictions are open, then I will be happy, then Sabbath is for you. If you're a part of our live stream production team, Sabbath is definitely for you. If you're beat down, worn out, exhausted because of the unrelenting 24/7 demands of the world that we live in, Sabbath is for you. See, I think that we've been tricked into thinking that our default state of exhaustion is normal, but we weren't meant to be this way. And just last week, I was talking with Sammy, who he's been recently diagnosed with sleep apnea. But thanks to the help of his brand new sleep apnea machine, he has been able to sleep through the night for the first time in years. And so you'll see him just bouncing around, and then he'll take a nap. But he's doing so well, and he said something incredibly profound to me that wasn't about the Sabbath, but definitely is about the Sabbath. He said, I never knew how truly exhausted I was until I felt what real rest was like. And I think that's all of us. We have gone so long without knowing what real rest is like that we think that being soul tired is just how we are supposed to be as people. But responding to the same issue, John Tyson, in his book, Beautiful Resistance, writes this: I often wonder whether this is why the church lacks credibility in our world. Maybe it's not our big scandals and cultural failures. Maybe it's something much smaller, more common, more deadly. Maybe it's our exhaustion. Maybe we're just too tired to model agape love, too scheduled to show compassion, too distracted to pray, too much like the exhausted culture around us. With that, what good is the claim that we have ultimate rest in Jesus when we are just as exhausted, just as busy, just as caught up in the day-to-day frenzy as everyone else who doesn't have Jesus? We may not need Sabbath in order to be saved, but I think that we do need Sabbath in order to make the rest of salvation that we claim to have in Jesus a daily reality, both for our own sake as well as the sake for an exhausted world who's begging for someone to show them that there is another way to live. And I think one of the silver linings of COVID is that it has shown us just how unnecessarily busy we were all before. The funny thing is, now when I ask people how they're doing, they have lots to say, but nobody says, I'm busy. I can't remember the last time I asked somebody, how are you doing? And they say, I'm busy. They say, I'm bored. I'm fed up. I'm tired of these restrictions. I just want to see my friends in their house. But nobody says they're busy, which maybe is a step in the right direction. And so I think as things hopefully open up in the next couple weeks or months or year, and we're potentially on the cusp of what the post-COVID world may be like, we are given this incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're given the opportunity to intentionally put into practice the rhythm of Sabbath into our lives now while life is slow, so that when things inevitably ramp up, when every sports team is running again, when every kids club is back on the schedule, when every family reunion is put on the calendar, we already have the rhythm so that we don't get sucked back into the unsustainable, exhausting pace of life that was so characteristic of the pre-COVID world. This opportunity to practice Sabbath 24 hours a day, 1 day a week, is an opportunity to begin practicing for eternity. And in this 24/7 world, this 24/6 kind of living becomes a prophetic declaration that there is another, better way to be human. It's a 24-hour period of time where time, not place, becomes holy. 24 hours where we don't wait until we're in heaven to start enjoying God. 24 hours where we remind ourselves that we did not create the world and it will continue to exist just fine without our efforts. 24 hours where we remember that with God there's nothing that we can do to make him love us more, and there's nothing that we can do to make him love him less than he does right now. It's a 24-hour period where we not only cease from work, but we also cease from even the thought of work. Where we don't produce anything, achieve anything, attain anything, or earn anything. It's 24 hours to unplug, detach, turn off, and ignore our devices, where we only do things that revitalize us. To do the things that restore our souls, that bring us deep soul-level rest, whatever that may look like for you. Maybe it's something like reading a good book until you fall asleep, and then sleeping until whenever you wake up. Sabbath is an opportunity of 24 hours when our only job is to enjoy the gifts of food and drink, family and friends, pleasure and beauty, as well as the giver of all of those gifts. And it's 24 hours to play your favorite board game with your kids, maybe even twice, and then go for a walk to Fairy Creek Falls, followed by ice cream at Happy Cow. 24 hours when you are obsessed with the question, what would I enjoy doing or not doing with God and people today? And then to worship God in community with other people doing the same thing, asking the same question. It's 24 hours to simply be as you are with God as he is. If For you, if you're like, man, 24 hours just seems totally out of reach and unrealistic, then start with 1. Start where you are, not where you want to be, but start carving time into your schedule now so that Sabbath rest begins to take root in your life. And then guard that like a doctor's appointment that you wouldn't miss for the world. For me and Jen, I take Saturdays and Mondays off, and so we've been trying to make Sunday night through Monday our Sabbath. And then we use Saturday as the day to do all of the work that needs to get done, all of the preparation, all of the chores so that we can rest on Monday. Because if we don't, then Monday just quickly becomes another Saturday for us. For you, it may be Saturday and Sunday kind of thing. It may be the last day of your set off. It might be a Thursday. Whatever it is, make it a weekly rhythm for you and try to figure out what works for you and for your family. Because when we do this, we're given the opportunity to let Jesus shape us to be more like him. Weekly, week after week, through the practice of Sabbath, so that when we are actually able to see our family and friends again, they will be able to notice that there's something tangibly different about us, that there's something that we have that they don't. When they ask us, we can tell them that we have a God who is so worth celebrating, who loves us so much and who we love so much that we are willing to have a mini holiday about it 52 times a year. So whatever that looks like for you, I urge you to make every effort to grab a hold of that Sabbath rest that is offered to each and every one of us today, because the Sabbath is for you. I'll invite Sammy back up. Lord God, thank you, man, that you care about us so much that you not only died for us, but you've given us life-giving commands so that we can have your life in us here and now. I pray that we would do the hard work required to carve out our schedules so that we could put in the effort required to rest deeply. And I pray that we could be a people who are defined by Sabbath rest and can extend that type of rest to people who desperately need it. I pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.